Does
Hello,
anybody know
everybody.
the
We are now live on the streaming. This is Matthew Miller. I'm the Fedora project leader, and this is our first Fedora Council meeting, a video meeting of 2016. The topic today is basically Langdon is going to present on the project objective of modularization. And I will turn it over to Langdon.
Oh boy, technology.
Yay, you're up.
The rank, maybe? That's probably not gonna work great. Can you guys see that as like a projected thing or like just as the slide deck?
We see the slide deck.
Yeah, all right, hold on a sec. Technology.
Awesome.
All right, what if I did this? And then I did this. How about that? Better?
Perfect.
Oh, excellent. Can you guys see me too?
No, no such luck.
All right, well then I will stop making faces at you. So basically this is the update on the objective of Fedora modularization. Sorry, I still kind of have a cold. And hopefully IRC stops dinging at me. So basically a little bit of kind of what we're talking about here. This is kind of somewhere like stage 2 or stage 3 of the Fedora Rings proposal. Initially we were talking about the additions, and we seem to have rolled those out fairly well. And of course I just noticed that my power cable is unplugged. This will badly in a minute. So what we've been talking about with Fedora modularization is how can we kind of go to the next step of, we were kind of initially talking about simplifying or increasing what's available as far as kind of repositories for Fedora in general to allow for the growth of things. So in other words, how do we kind of be more open-ended so that projects that aren't really at the most perfect at this point can still participate and have a way to distribute through Fedora, even when not only their packaging might not be quite right, but even the code might not be quite right. So basically allow things to grow without the constraints of kind of necessarily being listed as perfect. So it was kind of one aspect. Another aspect was to deconstruct somewhat the distribution such that various components could be maybe sideways installable or next to installable, or could be have a lot more latitude or a lot more freedom about how things get distributed. And hopefully I'm explaining that well. Does anybody have any questions there? Okay.
So what is all this good for? Is there a practical example of what we might deconstruct something I want to deconstruct it for?
Like an example of something, or do you mean like kind of in the more esoteric sense?
No, I mean like what good is this to users? Like why? What's the benefit of that deconstruction?
Well, so it's a little bit of
I hope that's a softball question.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing, right? So in order to enable things that are young to grow, you may want to have kind of both versions on the machine. I don't know. Let's use probably a terrible example because it's a pretty mature product, but something like HTTPD. There's the latest and greatest HTTPD, that might be in beta or maybe it's even in alpha. And so you might want to install that under certain conditions while you're doing development of some, latest and greatest website, but you need to, because you need some new feature that's in that version of HTTPD. But at the same time, you need to be able to run kind of your regular old applications, and you want to run something that is kind of well-known and mature and, in kind of good state. So in that way, that's kind of the simplest case of you want to be able to actually disconnect when an application is running and what version is running. We have ways of doing this right now. However, they're not consistent. They're not pretty, and so what we're trying to do with some of this objective is to try to figure out ways to make this a consistent and well understood solution for a lot of different problems. So that's kind of one example. Another example might be that you just kind of want to have, the kind of parallel install, I think is kind of the most common example, but there's lots of different reasons why you might want to parallel install. The other thing might be that you want to have two different versions of something depending on edition. So for example, in the server edition, you might want to have something that is even kind of more robust and mature, but you really want to provide that same kind of functionality, but you want the more bleeding edge version in workstation. Because in the human user case, maybe it can be less consistently reliable, and instead favor more on the user experience side. The other example I use too is kind of differences in packaging. So on the server side, maybe you want it to be incredibly secure and locked down, but maybe on the workstation side, you want to enable developers to use it without having to go through a lot of hoops. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Anything else? I can't see you guys either, so I can't tell if anybody's starting to talk. So next time maybe I'll set up technology. So kind of where are we on this? Well, it's not going terribly well for lots of different reasons. But to kind of indicate some of the things that have been, or some progress that has been made, the Environments of Stacks Working Group, I would say, is kind of the bulk of where this effort has been going on. And so there was the ALIF proposal by Nick Coughlin, and basically there's links at the end. That's what the numbers mean. So if you want to go read more about it, you can. But this is basically kind of almost a definition of the rings idea. I think he has 5 ALIFs, or I might be miscounting my 0. And with kind of various levels of quality, kind of going out as far as packaging is concerned, to try to simplify the kind of inclusion of an application inside Fedora without it necessarily being given all the guarantees that a typical Fedora package might have. One thing that I think has come out, and this is where I was kind of arguing whether this is really stage 3 or stage 2. Copper, I think, has been a big success and very useful to a lot of people. And this is the idea that you can just kind of package anything, and it just gives you a way to integrate your packaging into the Fedora community, provide easy ways to consume it with plugins for DNF so that it kind of just works. And I would say, that's in some ways some aspects of this modularity stuff. It doesn't allow for parallel installations of things, but it does allow for alternate versions of things. So you can have, kind of some bleeding edge Python 3 as a package and make it available to the people who want to use it, even though it might stomp on the what's built native, and maybe Python is not the best example. But I'm just trying to think what I was using recently. I actually use a bunch of GNOME 3 add-ons this way. Another initiative by the Environments of Stacks Working Group that I would say has kind of stalled is kind of the Playground initiative, which was, and part of why it's stalled is the definition of it has been a little bit messy. So some have argued that this could be some set of coppers that are considered more core, so closer to the real Fedora distribution, that might be chosen to be kind of a part of a set that, while not completely packaged correctly and not completely necessarily stable, are kind of getting closer, and they're moving in that direction. And the Playground idea is to provide kind of a simple access to all of the, at the end of the day, coppers that were kind of demarcated as part of this Playground. So you'd have one repository that you added, and you would actually get access to all of these different packages, because, like I said, they were kind of one step closer to the overall distribution. Another group that has been working on some aspects of this is on the base working group. And this, while for the kind of straight up additions perspective, You kind of had the base working group to kind of define the packages and components that were part of the, for lack of a better term, the base of Fedora that was used by each edition. The other aspect here is that if you're starting to try to pull a lot of the content away from the operating system so that you can kind of define what, and part of what you're talking about with modularization is defining the tight aspect of the operating system versus kind of everything else. And so one of the things that you need to do that is you have to define what the operating system is. What are the pieces that are just the operating system? Or what's the bare minimum that you can consider that needs to be shared by every environment? And those environments might include containers. They might include the server edition, the workstation edition. So basically all the things that kind of underpin all of the applications that we all should distribute in the distribution. I think this has also gone through a lot of fits and starts. There are some package lists that have been considered to be base, but I think the line of trying to figure out exactly what the goal is and what the charter was have been kind of tough. So what does bare minimum mean? Is that something that you can install on hardware and then can actually bring up a prompt? Or is it less than that? Is it just enough to do kind of hardware enableization? The other aspect here is, where does kind of the C runtime fit in? Is it part of base or is it part of some higher layer? So some of those questions, and then even actually going further kind of in the inclusive direction of, should base include something like systemd, or is that too far up the stack? So that there's been a lot of circular discussion, I think, on that, and having a lot of trouble with figuring out where you can make a declarative step forward, which has also been tough. The last thing is I also proposed some prototypes around modularization that made some assumptions about what was going on in the environments and stacks group as well as what's going on with the base group. And I would say those have also somewhat stalled because of some of the circular, kind of endless circles that some of the working groups went through. So I think that's kind of the update of what limited progress we have made. I would say, like I said, the biggest win related to this has been Copper, and we haven't gotten much further else. I think partially because there's been a lot of swirl around what all these things mean, as well as what user bases it's supporting. So that's kind of where we're at. Does anybody have any questions about that or anything that I missed and didn't comment on?
What is the state of the Playground repository now? Did you just say that, or did I?
To the best of my knowledge, it is stalled. The Environments and Stacks working group hasn't had a meeting in quite a while, and kind of needs to get back on track to finish up the Playground. And I don't know if I put it on the list on the next slide, but basically it's like kind of what are next steps. And I think one of the next steps for Playground is to just draw a line in the sand, put something up, and see what happens.
That sounds good, yeah.
Just forget about whether it's the right answer or not, and just try it and see what happens.
That's the whole idea with Playground in the first place. So.
Yeah, bring your own swing sets. Any other questions? Like I said, I can't see you guys, so please jump in. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide then. One of the things that needs to be updated is the wiki pages with some of the content that I just outlined, as well as kind of some of the current status. I think that's also been a little bit of the problem, is to try to have a landing place for all of this and a coordination across these things. And then I actually have a few proposals that I want to make to the Environments and Stacks group as well as the base working group. The one I just mentioned about Playground I think would be interesting. The other thing that I've been kind of the process of writing up is around trying to provide end users information where they can make good decisions about whether this particular package is one they want to install. For example, but when you're doing a kind of a package review, actually provide that information as metadata around the package. And so I can choose to install that package even when it's failed its package review, because I decided that this particular violation of the package review is okay with me for whatever reason, and to try to bring find a way that we can actually bring that information directly to the end user so that the packages are available even when they've failed the package review. Obviously, with some exceptions, for example, around licensing, perhaps. Maybe there's other exceptions that I'm not thinking of, but basically start to make those packages available even if they're failing, with the understanding of why they're failing, and then individual users could actually make decisions about it. Obviously, all the defaults would still be kind of against the current model, but the advanced classes might be allowed to choose something else. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is to try to bring some of the work that I've been working on within Red Hat into the community, and we've been struggling with how to do that exactly, but basically some proposals around what base could look like, because we found inside Red Hat that we're interested in trying to solve that problem as well, and so to try to bring some of that experience better into the community, and it's not which it has been kind of mixed so far, but try to really make a stronger push around that. Because we, like I said, at Red Hat actually have an interest in some of that work getting done. So those are two. I feel like I'm missing one. Yeah, and basically, I think kind of if we take that first step of allowing an end user to understand what aspects of a package are kind of compliant or non-compliant, or what quality that particular metric is at, for example, or whatever, I think that actually opens up a lot of possibilities, particularly around getting away from the rings metaphor, which I think has actually been kind of part of the problem, is that everyone's looking for these perfect concentric rings. It makes sense. Like we really want to put a nice metaphor on it, but in fact, what I think is actually happening is that there's all kinds of orthogonal metrics, and I have, like I said, I have 3/4 of an email written up about this, where you really want to give somebody like a mutual fund profile that says I'm a low risk desktop user, and and then have all these different metrics that then kind of map to it.
Installing Fedora will be like trying to set up my retirement portfolio. Is that the?
Well, I think it'll be like where it's guided, and so you can get crazy and go and choose your own stuff. Apparently, that's one of the people you are. Or you can kind of say, hey, my risk profile is I want to retire in 2050, and so therefore I should map to all of these mutual funds. So something along those lines is kind of what I was wondering. Because then you don't have to worry about those kind of pretty concentric rings. Instead, you can kind of map a particular risk profile to a particular type of user, and then allow them to automatically choose components that map to that risk profile.
Automatic seems pretty important, because otherwise it would be pretty kind of intimidating to have to.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Think Yocto for your laptop, right?
Right.
This is, you are exactly right. I think the concern I have is basically that right now we basically have a 0 or a 1, right? We say, this package has all metrics perfect, or it has, 1 or more imperfect. And so we have this binary decision, and I think because the actual answer is much messier than that. And so it would be useful to allow users to, kind of offer the profile they're interested in meeting, and then have the packages mapped to them, rather than assuming all users work the same way.
I think that's also helpful because one of the problems with our 0 and 1 approach we have right now is that the 1 is almost always a lie. We spend a lot of work,
Different.
um, people kind of beat the package into shape to get past package review, and that's a high standard. And then after that, something slipped through at like 0.6 instead of 1, and we call it 1 anyways. And then other stuff starts out at a beautiful 1, and then after a couple releases and updates, cruft sneaks in, and it's down to 0.9, 0.8, and falling, and we don't really do much with that. And it's also very concerned with packaging quality, and so one of the things that could also go with the stuff you're talking about is not just packaging. Is this package a good package? But how buggy is this code, or how much does this change? How experimental is it? So it could be additional information, which is cool.
Well, and basically, I mean, one of the things that I think would be really interesting there, right, is actually integrating, essentially karma directly into the output, right? So instead of it again being kind of a 0-1 barrier that says, okay, this has been promoted, or yeah, I mean, it's promoted, right, because it's gotten better, but it's demoted in the sense that it's closer to ring 0. But the basically is like, can we actually include information about this its deployment and how commonly people are choosing this particular package? Are they, I think it would be really nice to know, for example, that of these 2 different Markdown viewers, 57% of people use this one and 2% use that one. And actually integrate that directly into the package engine, or directly into the consumption software.
Yeah, so there's a question from IRC, which I think you partly answered there, but where does this metadata come from? Does the packager include it and say, oh, I rate my own package, self-grading kind of thing? Or is there a separate, grading committee that does it, or is it all crowdsourced? How will that work?
So I think that remains to be seen, and I think it'll depend on the metric. I think we need to increase our automation. So I think some of these things can be automatically done, where they some piece of software looks at it and makes a little bit of a determination. For example, test coverage, right, in binaries. But maybe there's more things around packaging as well. So I think there's got to be an increased level of automation for one thing, so that this data can kind of be kept up to date. But then I think there will be some self-review stuff, and then I think you'll also have groups like the FPC who will continue to operate and continue to do their thing, except instead of kind of filling out a package review, they would actually be kind of marking up the package itself, and then that information carries with that package. And then obviously we would also need a way to degrade that information over time, to kind of your earlier point. So if no one has done a package review of it in the last year, well, then maybe there's some impact to the overall metrics, or there's another metric that just indicates the recentness of the information. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I like the idea. Right now, there's the Fedora. For people who don't know, when a package comes into Fedora, part of the process is somebody looks over it, and we have an automated script which actually handles a lot of the checklist items about whether files are put in the right place and some other things, as much as it possibly can. And so that script ends up then with actually a literal checklist as the output. And so having that checklist basically be part of the metadata make a lot of sense, or at least some abstraction of it, because some of its technical details nobody cares about. But did it pass this section of the checklist?
Right. So I made it so that I can see a little better. I don't know if I can see IRC, but you can also see the notes there. So that's the links, and obviously we'll put the presentation somewhere that will be useful to find. Are there more questions? So I guess the kind of current status is we keep getting fits and starts on some of this stuff. I think we need to attract more people to want to participate. I think that the best place to do that is probably environments and stacks, and so we need to, I don't want to say reboot, that's not quite the right word, but re-engage environments and stacks. I'm working on this and making progress, and try to get some of the pressures of everything that we all have to do all the time, and actually move forward with some of this work. Anything else, or should we move on to whatever the next topic is?
I don't think I have anything else. Does anybody else, other council members, anybody else have other questions? I think you're all on mute, but you should be able to unmute yourselves. I didn't lock the mute.
Okay, this is Jan. Do you have any timelines when you would like to have these, at least, let's say, in some draft version, working?
Yeah. I don't know. Let's make that something I will have for maybe not the next council meeting, but the one after that. But I would like to see stuff soon. But it's not. Part of the problem here is it's not just it's not just the ideas, right? It's not just the concepts. It's also the infrastructure, right? We've got infrastructure changes, we've got tooling changes, all these things. So I would very much like to see increased participation in environments and stacks, because we need the people to do the work.
Okay, understand. Thank you.
Somebody else had a question in IRC that I am trying to read.
Yeah, the question is about actually how coppers get nominated for the playground. What's the threshold that makes a copper? Is it self-nomination there, or is that Environment Stacks committee decision, or is it something else?
I think the proposal had it kind of more like it might have been ENS, but I can't remember the group, but a little bit more like an FPC review. So like self-nominated, and then people. I'm trying to find the page open. I think they talked about this, or maybe it was in a meeting. Sorry, I'm just reading.
So the answer to that is we don't know right now. That's the answer.
Yeah, probably. I mean, the proposal never got approved, so the answer is certainly not fixed. But I think the idea originally was that it was kind of self-nominated and then kind of approved by somebody. I want to say ENS or FPC or somebody like that.
I like ENS as an acronym because near where I grew up, there's an Amish grocery store called that, ENS Bulk Foods. So that's my picture every time you say that.
To answer one of the other questions here is basically, is there a track or a task list for this? I think that's where our biggest sticking point is that we don't have one. So I will definitely take it under as a to-do item to start a list of things where people can contribute directly to this initiative, even if it falls under ENS or BASE or whatever.
Cool. I think that would be really helpful.
Oh, somebody else. Oh, it's DCAUS offering to help. All right.
Cool. Yeah, so thank you very much for the presentation. I feel a little bit less lost about how things are going, so that's nice. I think we didn't have any other business on the agenda right now. One thing worth noting, we have now an agreement with UnixStickers.com so that they can actually make Fedora stickers with the official trademark-approved logo. So you need to get some swag there, and we're going to be getting free stickers from them for conferences and stuff, so it's a win-win sort of deal there. So that's a cool thing that happened.
I need them to make a full laptop skin, which they don't do, unfortunately.
Sorry. Well, right now we're starting with stickers, but the idea is that the design team will approve other things, other logos, and so on. Right now, it's basically pretty basic, just Fedora logo stickers. But there'll be other merchandise and things in the future as the design team approves that, and we'll see more awesome stuff from that. Okay. So that's all I have for this meeting. Let's take our other business, back to the mailing list and the IRC, and say goodbye to video for now. Bye, everybody.